So again, to summarize, we have two types of errors, system errors and human errors. Actually, the majority are human errors. But we're starting our discussion with system errors. So last week nasimulan na natin i-discuss yung ergonomics or human factors engineering. Specifically, the case of alarm fatigue, no? Yung sa cardiac monitor na pinatay na lang, tapos kinaumagahan nakitang patay na lang yung pasyente. This meeting, we're going to discuss two more cases of system errors, and specifically two more cases of human factors engineering errors. One on handoffs. So kapag nag-endorse ka, kapag sa dulo ng duty mo, and the other is about a medical device problem. This time, the medical device is a glucometer. After that, we're going to move on to communication errors, another type of system errors. So for this, I'm just reiterating, traditionally, medicine has treated errors as failings of individuals due to a lack of knowledge or skill. Baka kulang lang sa training, di ba? However, the systems approach teaches us to look at the failings of individuals in the context of poorly defined systems or poorly designed systems. In other words, hindi naman training ang kulang, kundi yung sistema talaga makes humans and employees prone to making these mistakes. By using such an approach, it helps us identify the factors responsible for human errors. Kasi, mas madaling baguhin yung system, to be honest, kaysa baguhin yung human. So, in doing so, we could change or modify the underlying systems to reduce the occurrence of the same errors or minimize their impact on patients. Kasi, to make mistakes, sabi nga diba, may kasabihan tayo, to err is human. Yung pagkakamali, pagkakagawa ng mistakes, that's part of human nature. So, we need to compensate that by making systems that make it impossible or make it more difficult to make mistakes. So, this is the chapter overview from our book. So we need to learn about the different types of errors through various clinical vignettes. So nagsimula na tayo last week sa first case natin sa human factors engineering. This meeting, we're going to talk about two more cases. Towards the other half of this lecture, we're going to discuss communication errors. Now, could we improve on these communication issues? Next meeting, we're going to discuss the proper use of electronic medical records to improve patient safety. Ulitin ko lang ulit, ha? In human factors engineering, it doesn't mean na yung humans, yung i-engineer mo. You're going to engineer the aspects of the system that interacts with humans so that you take into consideration the human limitations, no? For example, itong nasa picture na to. Ang tendency daw kapag nag-work sa laptop na ganyan kababa, nagsislouch, and it's going to lead to chronic pain sa neck later on. So, by designing an ergonomic position, so pwedeng meron kang standing desk, o kaya naman mas mataas lang yung positioning ng chair, having an ergonomic chair, that's where ergonomics comes in. So, think of it as a branch of engineering, how to design systems so that it's fit for purpose by humans. So, halimbawa pumapasok dyan, kahit yung mga buttons lang sa mga medical devices natin, that's under the scope of human factors engineering. Okay, so just to summarize, this clinical vignette 1, we talked about the case of a 55-year-old woman who was admitted for a non-ST segment elevation myocardial infarction or NSTEMI. Naturally, hinook siya to a cardiac monitor. Overnight, the monitor kept constantly alarming. Tapos nakakalito po yung alarm niya. Kasi yung isang alarm, low voltage. Kapag low voltage, di ba? Papalitan lang yung baterya o kaya naman isasaksak sa outlet. Pero yung isa niyang alarm, ventricular fibrillation. So, because of that, narindi na, tapos nasawa ng makinig sa alarm, yung nurse and yung resident, tapos misleading pa kasi yung alarm na yon. So, ginawa nila, they silenced all telemetry alarms. The next morning, the patient was found unresponsive and could not be revived. Most likely due to a fetal arrhythmia na sana nahuli with the cardiac monitor. Right? So, what did this clinical vignette show? It taught us about alarm fatigue. So yung alarm, nakapag tunog ng tunog, eventually, nakakarindi na at nakakasawa ng pakinggan para sa mga personnel, hindi lang papakinggan. So that's the danger of alarm fatigue. Next, we're going to move on to the next clinical vignette, still under human factors engineering. So kanina, yung clinical vignette number 1 is about a cardiac monitor. Clinical vignette number 2 is about a faulty glucometer. So it's entitled Man and His Machine. So the case is like this. A 42-year-old female with type 1 diabetes mellitus was admitted to the hospital. A recently recruited nurse administered insulin based on normal glucose readings from a finger stick test. So tama naman yun, di ba? However, 2 hours later, the patient was found unresponsive. A repeat test with the same glucometer showed a normal reading. Because of that, the specialists suspected a hypoglycemic coma. So a test with a different glucometer was done. It revealed that a critically low glucose level of 34. This confirmed that the first device was actually faulty. So wala man lang any marker doon, no? Any indication na hindi pala gumagana na ng tama yung first na glucometer. So the patient therefore suffered long-term neurological damage. So it's no longer reversible, unfortunately. So this time, ang problem naman dito, yung glucometer, even if hindi na siya accurate, even if hindi na siya nagbabasa ng tama, meron pa siya nilalabas na readout, di ba? And so, ang solution natin dito is another one of human factors engineering. The medical error in this case was a faulty glucometer. If the device had been calibrated and had undergone validity testing, the patient's hypoglycemic coma and resulting disability could have been avoided. So even if meron kayong technology na ginagamit sa ospital, even that is still not immune from validation and from errors. So dapat i-validate nyo pa rin sila. So there are two types of medical errors. And this is another classification. Either error of commission or error of omission. Pag error of commission, ibig sabihin, meron kang ginawang mali. Pag error of omission, meron ka dapat ginawang tama, pero hindi mo ginawa. So, the error of commission occurs because of the wrong action taken. So, yun yung ini-illustrate dito sa clinical vignette na to. This time is the case of a faulty glucometer. Meron siyang ginawa, pero hindi niya binalidate. Yung ginamit niya pala is sira or faulty. Pwede rin namang error of omission. Error of omission occurs because of actions not taken. So in this case, yung hindi ginawa yung pagbabalidate, di ba? Pero imagine another case. Halimbawa, meron namang case na hindi matay. Tapos, ililipat sana sa stretcher. Pero yung stretcher pala, nakalimutan stabilize. Because of that, nahulog yung patient. In that case, that's also another example of error of omission. As we have mentioned, human factors engineering is also known as the field of ergonomics. So essentially, you're designing for safety. So the field of HFE attempts to identify and address these medical errors. Its goal is to optimize the relationship between humans and systems. It takes into account human strengths and limitations in the design of interactive systems. In other words, you look at the factors that interact with humans, and you take into consideration the human limitations when using them. So, the HF engineers study activities to assess physical demands, psychological workload, team dynamics, and device design to optimize tasks. The overall goal is to improve safety and minimize the risk of error in complex environments. So, things like the setup ng mga buttons, pasok yan under human factors engineering. Gano'ng kataas yung upuan, diba? Under yan ng ergonomics. Human factors engineering follow certain assumptions while trying to solve these patient safety problems. For example, number 1, mismatch of task demands to human capabilities give rise to errors and stress. Number 2, it's usually preferable to change the system to fit the operator than changing the operator to fit the system. So, hindi pala tama yung assumption, no? Na kulang lang sa training yung mga healthcare workers sa paggamit ng mga equipment. Minsan yung equipment talaga problematic or counterintuitive. Halimbawa, kung isang napakalaking button pag turn off ng machine, life sustaining na equipment halimbawa. 'Di ba? Parang sinasadya mo magkamali yung humans kapag ganun talaga yung setup ng machine. Number 3, design for a range of operators rather than an average. In other words, hindi mo i-assume na lahat capable or magaling sa technology or high-tech ang mindset. So you have to design for everyone. And lastly, when errors occur, look beyond the operator for root causes. in the system, equipment, or environment. And again, going back to our lesson here in patient safety, most errors are not human errors. They are actually systemic or system errors. So medical devices have revolutionized healthcare. Kung tutuusin, it's amazing na ngayon na hindi na kailangan ng health professionals to be around when we measure certain health parameters. For example, CBG or capillary blood glucose testing. Pwede na siyang gawin sa bahay, di ba, ng mga nagtitake ng insulin, ng mga diabetic. However, it's important to note that they could lead to errors as well. And dyan pumapasok yung human factors engineering. So, human factors engineering process in the medical device field takes a risk-centric approach. It aims to design out characteristics that could lead to human error. And it has 4 primary phases. Ano yung 4 na yon? Ang 4 na yon is, number 1, preliminary design, or preliminary analysis. Number 2 is design modification. Number 3 is validation, and number 4 is implementation. So, you try to analyze the design, which parts of that design could lead to error, then you propose modifications to that design. And of course, you have to validate it before finally implementing it. So, looking at this figure on the left, we could see that usefulness could be divided between utility and usability. Utility, kung gaano ba siya nag-fit into the intended function, while usability refers to how well users can use it functionally. Kung gaano ba siya kadaling gamitin. No? So, there are many things that goes into usability. Kunwari, is it easy to learn? Madali lang ba siya matutunan kahit hindi ka Gen Z? Number 2, is it efficient to use? Hindi ba siya sobrang hirap na dami mo kailangan pindutin? Number 3, is it to remember kahit hindi ka nakatingin sa isang libro? And number 4, few errors. And lastly, it should be subjectively pleasing. Yung tipong hindi naman bibitawan na lang, hindi yung tipong mas madali pang gawin manually kaysa gamitin yung medical device na yun. So those are the considerations when we are designing medical devices. So what are the benefits of human factors engineering in designing medical devices? So there are 4 here. The first is improved patient safety. So there may be a decreased patient risk through a design that has been heavily tested to exterminate any design flaws. Number 2, that could lead to better user adherence. A reduction in the complexity of medical devices may increase user adherence. Mas madali na kasi siyang gamitin. At aralin kung paano gamitin. Number 3, it could lead to reduced cost because it eliminates the need for costly modifications after product launch. In other words, itetest mo na siya bago mo pa siya ibenta. And lastly, it could lead to enhanced user experience, improving overall comfort of use and the look and feel of the device. Ultimately, human factors engineering converges to create a medical product that offers a safer, more efficient, and more satisfactory patient experience. So just to summarize the previous vignette, so ang problem doon is yung blood glucose monitoring device hindi pinapakita na kapag erroneous na pala yung kanyang reading. So ang simple way sana to improve doon is kung meron lang sana siyang display na nagsasabi na palitan yung baterya o kaya naman hindi na accurate yung reading. Yun sana, no? Okay, so we are done with 2 clinical vignettes, both on human factors engineering. The first one is on alarm fatigue, I discussed last meeting, and ito recently yung sa medical device. Now let's move on to a third clinical vignette. And this time we're discussing the handover process, no? Yung pag-endorse between duties. Okay, so let's read this case. So a 40-year-old woman was admitted for a migraine and started on an infusion. It's an ergotamine infusion. Yung migraine niya kasi 9 out of 10 and 6 na beses na siyang nagsuka nung time na yon. The resident signed out the patient to a night call resident over the phone. So yung ginawa nilang endorsan ay hindi face-to-face. During the night, the patient developed chest pain and severe hypertension, 170 over 100 millimeters mercury. And that's because of the infusion and the start. The on-call resident reviewed the new electronic sign-out board which listed no pre-existing conditions. So in this case, even if meron ng high-tech na device, because hindi na ilagay properly yung comorbidities ng patient, it still led to a complication, specifically an adverse drug reaction. On calling the original resident, he admitted he forgot to mention the patient's pre-existing uncontrolled hypertension. So what does this show? This shows that high-tech interventions are not the panacea or not the cure-all for the problems in the healthcare system. So even if meron kang high-tech na device, in this case, a new electronic sign-out board, you still need to do things properly. And so, what's the problem here? The problem here was the lack of a proper sign-out or handover or endorsement to the night duty. So, this case highlights the importance of the sign-out process. Had the resident taken enough time to discuss the patient face-to-face, the chance of missing the history of hypertension would have been less, and the hypertensive urgency could have been prevented. Baka nagmamadali ng umuwi yung resident. So, communication problems between healthcare providers are a common cause of preventable in-hospital disability and death. Sign out the transfer of care is a critical component, yet most organizations have an informal and unstructured process. And ma-realize nyo yan kapag nag-rotate na kayo sa mga wards, no? Wala namang pina-follow na step-by-step usually when endorsing a patient. Although maganda niyan, sa ibang wards, depende yan sa rotation nyo, no? Sa ibang wards, iikot talaga kayo per bed, tapos i-endorse nyo sa mga naka-night duty. But that does not happen in all rotations. So, minsan, bahala na, no? Kasi, kadalasan, ano pa yan, pagod na pagod pa sa, minsan post-duty pa, yung mag-endorse sa'yo. So, but still, it's important to remember that sign-outs and endorsements are very important. So now let's try to identify barriers to effective sign-outs. So we have 4 identified here: the physical setting, social setting, language barrier, and medium of communication. So for the physical setting, the environment should be private and quiet with few interruptions. So although it's nice sometimes to do a bedside na endorsement, actually that's not ideal. It's because walang privacy for the patient. Parang yung binidiscuss mong sakit niya, rinig na nung katabi niya. So nagkakaalaman na sila nung sakit ng isa't isa. Tapos paano mo i-endorse halimbawa na unstable pala yung patient, na baka malapit na siyang mag-unstable or mag-desaturate or ma-intubate. Diba? Hindi mo masasabi yun properly kapag nandun ka beside the patient or beside yung caregiver niya. So the environment should be private and quiet with few interruptions. It should be well lit. So, ideal ka makatake ng notes, no? So sana, doon siya sa private na area. Next, yung social setting. Differences in status and power can hinder open discussion. So, most ng mga endorsements kasi nangyayari in between people of the same profession. So, for example, yung mga nurses may sariling endorsement. Yung mga doctors may sariling endorsement. And sometimes that just happens because iba-iba naman kasi ng schedule. Iba yung schedule ng doctors and nurse. However, ideally, kapag ideally sa endorsement, magkakasama iba't ibang professions so that each could contribute in their own way. And on the same page yung buong healthcare team. Sige, next. Next would be language barrier. Only accepted abbreviations should be used and verbal orders should be repeated back. So, hindi lang language barrier na yung isa nagsasalta ng Spanish, isa nagsasalta ng English. So, pwede rin maging language barrier kapag yung nakalagay sa chart, puro mga acronym na lang, no? AP, ano ibig sabihin nun? A dynamic precordium pala. So, only use well-accepted medical abbreviations. Also, one way to make sure that na nakuha mo yung verbal na endorsement would be to try to repeat it back do sa tao nag-endorse sa'yo. And last would be the medium of communication. So, ideal pa rin talaga yung direct face-to-face handoffs. Kasi, rather than over the email or over phone calls. Kasi total, makikita rin naman kayo sa end ng duty ng isa and sa start ng duty mo. It would ensure that mas onte yung magiging risk of lost or forgotten na handoffs or sign-outs. So again, physical setting, social setting, language barrier, and medium of communication. One of the simple ways to address a proper handoff or endorsement would be to make a checklist. So this is a solution from human factors engineering as well. Human factors engineering uses checklists as a solution to address the sign-out process. In one study, checklist implementation was associated with a reduction in deaths and inpatient complication. So, it's a very simple and low-cost intervention, di ba? But it could lead to a lot of difference in patient care. Checklists can improve team communication and consistency and ensure that the steps for the sign-out process are performed in the correct order, thus ensuring that no vital information has been missed. So what are the steps in preparing a checklist for handoffs? It's here in the figure on the right. So first, divide the process into key steps. And then using those key steps, you generate a draft. The draft should be reviewed by the staff and the feedback is collected. Of course, it undergoes several processes of revision. Make a revised draft based on the feedback received, and finally, implement the checklist draft as a pilot. But even if it's already been piloted, you could still survey for further feedback. And finally, you could introduce the checklist. So what are 10 steps or tips that we could follow for a safe and effective handout? So look at this. So number 1 is time. There should be ample time for an adequate sign-out. Ano ba dapat yung nakalagay sa sign-out? Ang dapat nakalagay doon, what has happened in the past 24-hour duty cycle, yung mga kailangan pang gawin ng mga incoming duty na people, yon. And kung meron mga any outstanding laboratories. Of course, you should also ensure that nakalagay doon history of present illness as well as if there are any comorbidities. Number 2, the process should be active, allowing for questions. In other words, kung ikaw yung tatanggap ng endorsement, actively mo rin sinasabi kung ano yung napipick up mo, di ba? To be sure na nakuha mo siya properly. 3, emphasize sick patients and their management plans. Kung sino ba doon, halimbawa sa isang ward, yung pinaka-toxic, yung most likely to be worse off, and maaaring mga ilangan ng any other intervention such as code blue or kaya naman intubation. Number 4, know who the senior on call is. Sino ba dapat yung pag-referan? And dapat alam na mag-duty. Ano yung threshold? Kailan niya na kailangan tawagin yung seniors, di ba? Most likely naman tinatawag yung mga seniors kapag ano nga ba? Kailan nga ba tinatawag seniors? Pag meron ng nag-worsen yung status ng patient, kapag halimbawa unstable. Number 5, you should use one list, a single standardized and confidential list. Confidential, so dapat naka-incorporate din doon kung paano i-dispose properly yung list na yon. Number 6, details. The list should include admission date, important medications, and general plan. Next, any outstanding task. Use an updated and accurate list of tasks. Next, outstanding labs. Sign out all pending labs, studies, and consults. Halimbawa, kung may kukuhanin bang dugo sa gabi, na hindi na pwede ipagpaliban, no? Yon. Second to the last, admissions. Explain any expected admissions. Kung mayroon ba in-expect na dumating sa gabing yon. And lastly, morning updates. Make sure after the next morning, kapag kayo naman yung magsa-sign out and mag-hand off nung duty cycle na yon, you should be sure to make sure to update the list accordingly. So we're now done with 3 clinical vignettes, and all of those are somewhat related to human factors engineering. Now let's move on to a different type of system error. This time we're going to talk about communication issues. We're going to explore breakdowns in communication and their impact on patient safety. The title of this next clinical vignette is Doctors are from Mars, Nurses are from Venus. So this time, it illustrates communication failure between a nurse and physician. So tingnan natin yung nangyari. A physician suspects aspirin sensitivity in a 78-year-old patient but doesn't add it to the chart. Instead, anong ginawa niya? He left a handwritten note for the nurse to follow up. Ang nangyari kasi dito, yung 78-year-old patient, meron siyang bronchial asthma. So, long-standing na. Tapos na-observe nung physician, meron siyang nasal polyp. Yung nasal polyp na yon, pwedeng side effect ng aspirin. Okay? So, baka iniisip nila, meron na siyang aspirin hypersensitivity. So, later, the patient's daughter calls for advice on pain medicine. So, the nurse was intimidated by the busy doctor. Natakot siyang abalahin. Nahiya siya. Because of that, they checked the record. And there was no record of any allergies. Kasi nga nakalagay lang sa handwritten note. E nawala yung handwritten note. Because of that, nag-advise na lang yung nurse ng over-the-counter analgesic. Ang malas naman ng patient, ang nabili sa kanyang over-the-counter analgesic, hindi paracetamol. Ang nabili sa kanya, aspirin. Because of that, the patient had an anaphylactic reaction to the aspirin. So, because of that anaphylactic reaction, bumagsak yung kanyang blood pressure, ang tawag doon, anaphylactic shock, and yun pa yung kanyang ikinimatay. So, di ba? Ang simple lang sanang bagay, kung sana nag-usap na maayos yung doctor at yung nurse, okay naman kahit ilagay niya lang formally sa record ng patient na nagsususpect siya ng aspirin hypersensitivity. Di sana na hindi na prevent na sana yung pagkamatay ng pasyente. And these kinds of simple errors happens all the time, and it's because of poor communication. Communication errors are very pervasive in the healthcare system. So, sino ba yung may mali doon? So, clear, timely, and closed-loop communication could have prevented this strategy. The physician assumed the nurse would act on his note, while the nurse assumed an over-the-counter drug was safe without consulting the doctor. So, pareho silang mali, technically, di ba? The physician could have been more clear when giving the instructions. So, pwedeng instead of sulat niya sa note, verbally kausapin niya, di ba? While the nurse naman could have been more assertive. Pwede naman niya sana abalayan yung doktor, i-confirm kung ano ba talaga yung mga pwedeng ibigay na pain medication. And aside from that, hindi naman porket over the counter, automatically safe na, di ba? Especially because merong comorbidities, merong asthma yung pasyente. So, maganda sana ginawa ng nurse, kinonfirm niyo muna sa doktor kung ano yung magandang pain medication. Okay? So, this kind of communication error is very common. The Joint Commission on Accreditation of Health Organizations have found that communication errors are the root cause in 2/3 of serious medical errors. So, more than half of the medical errors dahil lang sa simpleng problema sa communication. Also, a review of in-hospital deaths found communication errors were the leading cause, twice as frequent as errors from inadequate clinical skill. So, yan namang mga healthcare workers naman are some of the most highly trained individuals, di ba? Among the different professions. So, ano lang problema? Yung pag-communicate, no? Yung pag-uusap-usap. So, ano nga ba mga barriers sa communication between physicians and nurses? First of all, it's the busy schedule and stressful work environments. So, individually naman kasi, di ba, magkaiba ng task ng doctor sa nurse, and minsan talagang wala silang time na makapag-usap pa sa isa't isa, no? And of course, it's a stressful work environment. Minsan, para kakausapin mo pa lang yung isang health professional, parang nangingilang na sila, naiilang na sila sa iyo kasi natatakot sila na baka pasama sila ng trabaho, di ba? Of course, number 2 is continuous interruptions and multiple patient handoffs. Nabanggit ko na nga ito na magkaiba yung schedule ng doctor sa nurse. Yung doctor, mas mahaba yung duty time niya, especially yung mga residents, while yung nurses, 8-hour cycle yan. So sa isang duty mo, makikita ka dalawang mga around 2 to 3 cycles of nurses, no? So nag-iiba-iba. And of course, there are continuous interruptions. Para hindi ka pa tapos sa isang ginagawa mo, meron namang kasunod. Next would be gender and role status disparity with long-standing hierarchical practices. Sabi ko na ito noon, hierarchy sa hospital, napakadaming baitang, napakadaming palapag. Tapos, na-associate pa dyan yung gender disparity. Karamihan kasi nung nurses, traditionally, especially sa western countries, babae. While yung doctors naman, karamihan, lalaki. And because of this disparity, pwedeng maging magkaakibat yung gender issues, no? Doon sa pag-uusap nilang dalawa. And also, meron pa sinasabi na males prefer more direct communication, allegedly, while women want more indirect forms of communication. I'm not sure if that's true, but isa yan sa magtuturong dahilan sa communication problems. Number 4 would be professional education and training disparities leading to different perspectives. Kasi nga naman, iba nga naman yung pinag-aralan ng doktor sa nurse. So, pwedeng yung kanilang perspective or pananaw doon sa pag-aalaga ng pasyente, maaaring magkaiba. Okay? There's also a factor of attitude and behavioral factors such as lack of mutual respect and intimidation. So makita nyo ito sa hospital minsan. Some doctors want to rule by fear, no? Kaysa naman questionin sila yung panggagamot nila, mas mabuti pang takutin na lang nila yung mga professionals around them. But that's not a good way of doing things, di ba? Of course, you need to recognize that you should have mutual respect, especially yung mga kausap mo naman dyan sa ospital, lahat yan graduate ng 4-year course. Karamihan pala, hindi pala lahat. Pero either way, the point is, everyone in the hospital are mostly highly educated. Okay? Second to the last, over-reliance on electronic systems, reducing face-to-face interaction. So maganda sana yung mga ganyan electronic systems, no? Yung parang meron na kayong sa website, tapos dun ilalagay lahat ng data, nandun yung chart. But ang naging problem nun, discourage pa niya lalo yung face-to-face interaction. So yung parang pwede mo na, ang dali-dali naman sanang sabihin na lang sa ka-duty mo na nurse or kung sino man, health professional. But kailangan pa idaan sa electronic system. Diba? And lastly, linguistic and cultural barriers. Butin lang sa Pilipinas, hindi siya kasing laki na issue sa US. Kasi sa US, diba, ang daming mga immigrants. Kasama ng mga Pilipino doon. No? So, pwedeng maging barrier yon. Okay? So, those are the different barriers in nurse-physician communication. So, ano ang solusyon sa mga nakita natin na communication problems between nurses and physicians? We have 3. The 3 E's of effective communication. 1. Establishing organizational culture. 2. Encouraging face-to-face communication. And lastly, exchange of information via tools. Sige. Starting with the first one, establishing organizational culture. First, you need to foster a patient-centered, safety-focused open environment that supports teamwork and mutual respect. Diba yung mga nabanggit ko sa inyo na hierarchies, actually, pwede naman niyang i-flatten. So, address disruptive behavior and flatten hierarchies. Also, as an organization, pwede namang i-address ng hospital administration yung mga people with disruptive behavior. So, halimbawa, yung mga doktor na nag-aamok pag na-question, o kaya naman pag nagkaroon ng aberya sa kanyang management ng case, pwede naman yung i-address organizationally. Okay? Next, encourage face-to-face communication. You should promote direct verbal communication through structured interdisciplinary rounds and other meetings to complement electronic records. So, hindi sapat na nag-uusap lang via records, whether electronic pa yan or nasa papel. No? So, mas maganda pa rin, merong interdisciplinary rounds. No? Yung bedside rounds, yung iikot talaga at dinidiscuss lahat ng pasyente. And take note, interdisciplinary. So, hindi siya doctors lang. Hindi lang siya doctor. Maganda ang isama yung all other healthcare professionals na engaged sa care ng patient. Okay? And lastly, tools. Meron tayong tinatawag na SBAR, no? Yan, isang way lang yan para makapagbigay ng feedback yung healthcare worker do sa management of a certain patient, no? So, call-outs and huddles to standardize communication. Set expectations as well as to ensure clarity. Let's look closely do sa number 3. Yung sabi ko may SBAR. Ano ba yung SBAR? Acronym kasi yun. SBAR. S, situation. B, background. A, assessment. And R, recommendation. So, halimbawa, yung nurse, meron siya nakita, feeling niya, mali do sa management ng patient. Diba? Feeling niya, na-miss out ng doktor kasi yung doktor puyat na. Ilang araw nang di natutulog. So, magsusulat siya, SBAR. S, situation. Write a concise statement of the problem. I think meron po ako na-observe na side effect from this medication. Diba? B, background. Pertinent information. Ano ba yung nakita niya na pertinent information? Sinimulan ng yung gamot na to, nagkaroon ng maculopapular rash yung pasyente. A, assessment or analysis of the situation. I feel like this is a adverse drug reaction to this antibiotic. And our recommendation, the action requested, para clearly masasabi ng nurse kung ano gusto niyang mangyari doon sa kanyang recommendation. So in this case, could we shift to another antibiotic? Diba? So ganun lang kasimple. But all of those emphasizes na dapat fact-based, hindi personalan, hindi dahil nag-aaway kayo, no? Dahil meron kang gustong mangyari, clearly and concisely, diba? Pwedeng bullet points lang yan. Next, another communication tool that we could employ sa hospitals is what we call the closed-loop communication. So, simple lang yan. Parang ulitin mo lang pabalik sa nagsabi sa'yo. So, number 1, the sender sends a message. Nurse, titrate the inotrope of this patient by 2 cc per hour if mababa ang BP. So, 2, the receiver confirms receipt of the message. Doc, so itatitrate ko po yung drip, 2 cc every hour kapag mababa sa gantong cut-off yung BP niya. And 3, the sender confirms the message was interpreted correctly. In other words, ulitin mo lang yung sinabi sa'yo just to make sure na narinig at naintindihan ka ng tama. Yun lang yun. So let's move on now to the next clinical vignette. And this time, it's still about communication but highlighting a specific type of problem. This time, it's about cultural issues. Okay, so the title of this vignette is called Different Paths, Same Goal. Yan. So, sige. So, we have the case of a 65-year-old woman diagnosed with hypertension. Her son acts as her interpreter kasi hindi siya marunong mag-English in this case kasi nasa US sila. Nanggaling sila ng Qatar. Okay? So, the physician prescribes a diuretic, furosemide 40 milligrams once daily. Ano yun, it's a loop diuretic, it's a ceiling diuretic na tinatawag. Ibig sabihin nun, kaya kanyang paihiin ng matindi. No? Kasi iba naman, kaya siya niresetahan ng diuretic kasi yung hypertension niya, elevated pa rin kahit naka-maximal na siya na dose sa ibang gamot. No? So because of this, the son expresses concerns about side effects, especially during the upcoming Ramadan fasting, but is just quickly reassured and dismissed by the rushed physician. Dahil nagmamadali siya, hindi niya naisip, ano ba connection ng Ramadan sa diuretic? Hindi niya naisip na, nagfa-fasting kasi kapag Ramadan, di ba? From pagsikat ng araw hanggang paglubog ng araw, hindi sila kumakain. No? Because of that, anong nangyari? Tingnan natin yung third bullet. The patient observed Ramadan fast, restricting water intake, takes the diuretic, and subsequently hospitalized for severe dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. So, yan. Sinabihan naman siya, pero dahil hindi niya inisip kung ano yung koneksyon ng Ramadan, which is a cultural practice, doon sa kanyang niresetang gamot, na-miss out na yun, di ba? This case illustrates the cost of cultural unawareness because the physician failed to communicate effectively due to language and cultural barriers. Spending time to understand the patient's religious beliefs could have prevented this complication, specifically yung Ramadan fasting. Sa Ramadan kasi, from sun up to sundown, hindi ka pwedeng kumain at uminom. So kahit tubig, hindi pwede. So ano sana pwede niyang ginawa? Pwede niya sana sinabihan na mag-compensate ng pag-inom habang gabi pa or kapag lumubog na ang araw, no? He could have sana emphasized hydration or chosen just an alternative medication. Meron namang antihypertensive medication na hindi diuretic, di ba? Okay. So, pwede sana for that month lang, di ba? Okay. So, actually, cultural competence is a foundation of patient safety because culture shapes an individual's health values, beliefs, and behaviors. So, failure to communicate effectively during cross-cultural interactions increases the possibility of medical errors and can lead to non-compliance, misunderstanding, and poor outcomes. So, kung delikado pala ang cultural unawareness, ano yung dapat natin gawin to be culturally competent? So, we should follow what Emilio Carrillo describes as a patient-based approach to cultural competence. So to avoid cultural generalizations, physicians can use a patient-centered approach to understand, communicate with, and care for patients from diverse backgrounds. Sige, isa-isahin natin to. First is accessing core cross-cultural issues. So dapat, meron ka ng awareness kung anong kultura ng pasyente mo. So halimbawa, Muslim, edi try mong basahin kung ano ba yung medical cultural practices ng mga Muslim, di ba? Kasi that would influence the different communication styles, mistrust, and even family dynamics. So, doon ba sa kultura nila, close-knit ba sila o medyo kanya-kanya? Diba? Next, explore the meaning of the illness for the patient and their family. Bawat kultura kasi, meron niyang tinatawag na explanatory model. Kung sa palagay nila, paano nangyayari ang sakit. Kasi hindi naman lahat ng kultura merong scientific na mindset and understanding, di ba? Halimbawa, sa Pilipinas, meron tayong mga konsepto ng hiyang, usog, lamig, paglilihi. Lahat naman yun kung titingnan mo closely or at first glance, hindi naman yan parang scientific na concepts, di ba? Pero, that informs a lot of our patients culturally. Third, you should determine the social context of the patient, such as socioeconomic status and support systems. So, simple lang. Halimbawa, may matanda kang pasyente. Tanong mo, kumusta naman po yung mga pambili nyo ng gamot? Sino po sumasagot? Diba? Mag-isa lang ho ba kayo sa bahay? Sino po kasama nyo? May nag-aalaga ho ba sa inyo pag sumasakit yung rayuma nyo? Those kinds of things. Lastly, you should negotiate across cultures to find a mutually acceptable plan. So, doon mo iti-tailor fit yung management mo for every individual patient, especially those coming from different cultures. So, focus tayo dun sa number 2, dun sa listahan natin kanina. Yung meaning sa illness, yung tawag natin explanatory models. Don't assume, you should ask. Kasi, iba-iba yan kada tao. So, individuals from different cultures have different perceptions of disease. Yun namang inaral mo doon sa physiology, sa pathophysiology, for sure, hindi yan naaral ng pasyente. Unless nag-google siya on TED. But even then, hindi enough, hindi complete yung picture nila. Nakakala understanding. So, how could you address that? You should do respectful questioning to elicit the patient's explanatory model of their illness. So, yung mga bagay na halimbawa magandang itanong, here are the key questions to ask. What do you think has caused your problem? Ano niyo po ba sa tingin to? Dahil ba naulanan kayo? Dahil nalamigan? Why do you think it started when it did? No? Kasi for sure, yung iniisip mong causation, halimbawa, alam naman natin mga ubo, sipon, lagnat, mga trangkaso, bacterial yan or viral, di ba? Pero sa kanila, ano yung isip nila siguro? Nahamugan po. No? So, yung mga ganong bagay. And what worries you the most about your problem? What kind of treatment do you think would work? And what have you used any non-medical remedies or treatments? Because of course, remember, na yung mga yan, although sometimes they're harmless. Halimbawa, yung mga pamahid, mostly harmless naman yan, di ba? Nakatulong nga yan makarelieve kasi counter-irritant sila matatawag. In other words, kung may masakit sa kasukasuan mo, pinahiran mo ng maanghang na something, such as efficacent oil, that helps in relieving the pain. Scientific yon, di ba? Pero paano ko yung kanyang non-medical remedy ay yung steam inhalation. Tapos yung gusto nila yung mainit pa yung talaga nakapaso. Di ba? Baka naman burns ang abutin ng pasyente. So, you're also asking this not just to explore the explanatory models of the patient, but also to warn them and to caution them against using harmful medications. And of course, minsan parang ano na rin yan, no? Parang pag-iwas mo sa kanila sa mga maling practices. Kasi baka halimbawa niya kasi yung mga cancer patients, no? Cancer patients, minsan, instead, dahil sa kanilang takot sa chemotherapy, nagfo-focus na lang instead sa mga herbal medications. Pwede mo namang sanang gawing tulay yon, di ba? Pwede mo silang pagsabayin. Wala namang masyadong drug interactions yon. So, yun. Because of the importance of cultural competency, is actually now required as a part of the medical curriculum in the United States, and especially because maraming ang immigration na gaganap doon, no? So, sige. So, what's the LEARN framework? The LEARN framework was devised to address healthcare disparities and to promote cultural competency during training. So, it's a tool used to aid patient-physician interactions. So, L stands for listen with empathy and understanding to the patient's perception of the problem. So, nagsisimula nga yun, by asking the questions. Yung na-discuss natin sa previous slide. Second, explain your perceptions of the problem. A, acknowledge and discuss the differences and similarities. Kumbaga, compare mo yung nalalaman mo knowledge medically and scientifically dun sa pasyente mo. And based on that, you could recommend a treatment plan. And lastly, negotiate a treatment plan that is mutually agreeable. So halimbawa, hindi na convince yung pasyente, huwag mo hayaang sige, bahala ka na. Huwag ka na makinig sa akin. No? So, you find something that you have in common. No? So, you find something that is mutually agreeable to you both. Yeah, there. That's the LEARN framework. Okay, last 2 clinical vignettes for this meeting. So, this clinical vignette is entitled Eric's Fault. The vignette discusses miscommunication between residents during sign-out, resulting in a preventable adverse event and prolonged hospital stay. So this time, ang topic natin is handoffs or sign-out or endorsement sa Philippine parlance. Okay? So a resident named Eric briefly signs out a recovering meningitis patient to the night float resident, Chelsea. Overnight, the patient had a breakthrough seizure. So si Chelsea, I'm familiar with this case, nag-order ng seizure medications. Aside from that, nag-order siya ng multiple testing. The next day, The new team discovers that the patient's anti-seizure medication had been withheld due to liver concerns. This critical information was not documented or communicated during sign-out. Kumbaga, kinaumagaan lang nalaman na tinigil pala talaga yung anti-seizure medications kasi nga merong side effect sa liver. Okay? So, yun. So, yung risk minsan or problema kapag maraming duties, di ba? Papalit-palit yung duty. Especially kapag every 8 hour yung duty system. Pero in this case, since doctor sila, baka 24-hour duty naman. Pero still, di ba? Mayroong information na mawawala or makakaligtaan, ipasa. So, ano yung pagkakamali ni Eric doon? The resident failed to document or verbally communicate the discontinuation of a critical medication. So, this failure led to a preventable seizure, unnecessary workup, and prolonged hospital stay. Okay? So, 70% of sentinel events result from communication failure. So, communication failure really represents a sizable percent or fraction or proportion of these medical errors. So, out of these communication errors, 80% come from patient transfer. So, yung pagpapalit-palit ng shift is really an important source of medical error. Okay? And in the US, they have what we call ACGME work hour restrictions. Kung sa Pilipinas, uso pa sa mga residents natin, yung 24-hour duty and more than 24 hours actually, sa kanila, mas pinapagli na yung hours. And medyo applicable to ngayon sa clerks and interns. Kasi kung di ako kakamali, sa mga interns ngayon, 8 hours na lang dapat ang duty. So, anong impact no na unnecessary? Kahit umikli nga yung hours ng duty, dumami naman yung number of handoffs and endorsements. So it makes effective sign-outs even more critical nowadays. So how could we improve the sign-out process? Here are some key strategies. First, you could follow a certain template. So meron tayong two mnemonics there, sign out and anticipate. Hindi na important masyado yung laman nila, basta standardized naman yan. Specifically, sasabihin mo lang kung ano yung mga dapat tandaan, kung saan yung course ng patient in the wards, kung na-expect mo ba siyang lalala or bubuti na. Okay? So, para may way to prioritize yung naka-duty, lalo na yan sa gabi, kung sino yung babantayan talaga nilang maigi. Also, it's encouraged to have face-to-face verbal communication. Wala pa rin tatalo sa pag-uusap ng harap-harapan. Okay? Third, minimize distractions during the sign-out process. It's ideal kung meron kayong specified na talagang place and time kung saan kayo mag-meet during your endorsements. Fourth, ideally, there should be faculty supervision and evaluation to give residents the motivation to improve in their endorsement skills. And lastly, it should be incorporated into the residency curriculum. Now, this is our final vignette for communication errors. Okay? So, this one is about workplace bullying. So, let's read the case. Katie is a new nurse. She is caring for a post-op, morbidly obese patient. So, mahirap yon buhatin mag-isa, di ba? So, she had a senior nurse. Her senior nurse is Miss Brown. However, Miss Brown is intimidating and has been condescending toward Katie. So, kapag ganyan ba naman yung senior mo, matatakot talagang lapitan, di ba? So, what happened? The patient wanted to get up, but Katie is unsure if she can manage the transfer alone. And because she's intimidated by Miss Brown, Katie didn't ask for help. Natakot siya mapagalitan or ipahiya. And because of that, she attempted the transfer by herself. Because of that, the patient fell. No? So yun. This one is a direct case of bullying. And of course, in the hospital, I'm sure you're going to still meet a lot of bullies among your seniors. So, ano gagawin natin? Tingnan natin sa following slides. But first was the impact of workplace violence on patient safety. So, nakita nating violence ni Ms. Brown kay Katie is an example of vertical violence. Meron din natawag na horizontal violence. Kapag vertical, ibig sabihin, yung senior binubully yung junior. Pag horizontal, pwede yung mga classmates nyo, yung mga level ninyo, no? So, this case exemplifies vertical violence and unprofessional behavior created an environment where the junior nurse was too intimidated to ask for necessary assistance, leading to a preventable patient safety event. Workplace bullying negatively impacts the mental and physical health of victims, leading to impaired functioning and medical errors. A damaged work environment and high staff turnover threaten the quality of patient care and safety. There is an inverse relationship between workplace violence and quality of care. As violence increases, patient safety decreases. That's why we shouldn't tolerate bullying in the workplace, no? Kung nung high school tayo, grade school, mga bata lang yan na nag-aaway-away, ngayon sa workplace, to be a bully professionally is to promote or to decrease patient safety, di ba? Kasi habang tumataas yung bullying, bumababa yung patient safety. So anong gagawin para mawaksan yung bullying in nursing? So here are 5 strategies na nabanggit sa reference natin. First would be to break the silence. Empower nurses through education about workplace violence and how to respond. So dapat merong avenues, no? Dapat may way para ma-report ng juniors kapag meron ng bubuli sa kanila na seniors. Next, create codes of conduct. Establish and enforce codes of conduct with zero tolerance for bullying. So dapat yung hospital policy malinaw, no? Na hindi tatanggapin yung pagmubuli sa hospital na yon. Third, role modeling. Nursing educators and faculty must model professional and civil behavior. So dapat kung sino yung faculty, sila yung mangunguna na magpapakita ng kabutihan and humility sa kanilang mga estudyante. Fourth, communication and collaboration training. So may nabanggit dito na program, team steps, yan lang ay mga tools to prevent bullying. So yun, it will be done to improve teamwork as well. And lastly, strong nursing leadership. Leaders must create violence prevention program, establish clear policies, and support. So nakita natin with this lecture and the previous one, we were able to look at examples of communication problems as well as human factor engineering problems. No? So together, they make up what we call the system errors. So understanding system errors requires looking beyond individual failings to the context of the systems in which people work. Normal lang kasi magkamali ang humans. Ang question is, yung system ba na yun, is it promoting yung errors or dapat it should prevent those errors? So from alarm fatigue and faulty equipment to communication breakdowns and toxic work environment, patient safety is a system-wide responsibility. By applying human factor engineering principles, fostering a culture of safety, improving communication, as well as addressing disruptive behaviors, we can create a safer healthcare environment for both patients and providers. Okay, and that's just it for our lecture. Kung meron kayong tanong, just message me. Thank you everyone.